Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is really lovely to see everyone. I'm feeling a little bit of apprehension about giving this talk, which is called Waking Up in Delusion, because it's a reflection on something that happened to me in the summer. And, that seems quite a long time ago now. But I'm taking courage from the fact that we all share the same nature. And so I'm hoping that some part of this talk will chime with you in the present. And then we can share the experience of practicing in this life as a messy miracle. There's a story about Suzuki Roshi during an extended sitting period at the San Francisco Zen Center. All the participants were meditating in the Zendo when Suzuki Roshi poked his head around the door and spoke into the deep silence. All the difficulties you are experiencing now, you will have for the rest of your life. Such mischievousness. So much for the trance of self-improvement. There really is no escape from being human. Dogen said, we wake up in delusion, not from delusion. I find both of these quotes very comforting whenever I fall into one of my favourite suffering traps. Do you have favourite suffering traps? My very best is the dead end of a dream of a better self. And I took a tumble into this one in the summer. And it all happened over a rakusu. So a rakusu, as you probably know, is a small patchwork bib worn by someone who's taken the precepts in a jukai ceremony. We'll hold such a ceremony in the autumn. And because of the arthritis in my fingers, Trudy had offered to sew a rakusu for me. As a complete non-sewer, and knowing the complexity of sewing this kind of mad fabric jigsaw, and sewing it as a practice, and so saying the chant with every stitch, Namu Kibutsu, Namu Kibutsu, I plunge into the life of Buddha. I felt totally overwhelmed by Trudy's generosity. And that was when a part of me, whose mantra is not worthy, not good enough, saw an opportunity. And soon it was whispering in my ear. It started to gorge itself on the disparity between my self-image and what actually happens on the ground. And it grew even bigger as it harvested evidence from past memories, the archives of my life. And soon another part joined in. I call it Dobbin, after the horse in George Orwell's novel Animal Farm. Dobbin's mantra was, I must try harder. And between them, these parts concocted a plan. And it went like this. And you can become very unsophisticatedly deluded when you fall into these places. And the plan was, the ceremony is over a year away. Plenty of time, if not to become good enough, well, at least time to get a bit better. And what better way to try harder than to write some vows? and then, just keep them. Well, the vows were very highfalutin, and only a seraphic being who never bumped into the ground would have been able to keep them. Unfortunately, towards the end of writing them, I heard laughter in the back of my head, and the words, "You geek dafty," Geordie words of endearment. Hilda, my imaginary friend. Hilda, a part of me, but not me. Partly a memory, actually, of the Geordie middle-aged women in the chapels I grew up in. Floral pinny wearing, teapot wielding, layers on of chapel teas. Sometimes one of them would be a caretaker, but they were never seen in the pulpit, and they weren't greatly valued. But they featured very largely in my childhood world because they were kind and generous and funny in a slightly subversive way that I didn't really understand. Sometimes I bump into Hilda in a shop queue or on the bus, and I find her quite often in koans. You know, the old woman who has an enlightenment experience and feels her whole body filled with the light of Amida Buddha. And she rushes off to her teacher, Hakuin. "What are you talking about?" Hakuin asked. "Does the light shine up your asshole?" Small as she was, she gave him a big push, saying, "I can see you're not enlightened yet." And they both burst out laughing. She's the one who bests the serious, dried up monk or scholar. No nonsense, grounded, no time for excursions into abstract thought. The one who can't resist popping at an ego swelled with self-importance, as in this favourite koan of mine. Mangu, Nanquan, and another monk were on a pilgrimage. Along the way, they met a woman who had a tea shop. The woman prepared a pot of tea and brought 3 cups. She said to them, "O monks, let those of you with miraculous powers drink tea." The 3 looked at each other, and the woman said, "Well, watch this decrepit old woman show her miraculous powers then." And she picked up the cups, poured out the tea, and went out. So very Hilda. Apparently, it's also so very Rilke, who said, "Being here is so very much. Being here is so very much." Sometimes I get into conversation with Hilda, and I suggest to her that useful as her approach to life may be, it is also possibly extremely limiting. That it's stopping the dimensions of seeing other dimensions in life beyond her experience, but spoken about by other people. Hilda tends to pooh-pooh such talk and says she'll stick to serving tea. So I ask her what she's afraid of. And into my head come words from a childhood hymn. There's a home for little children above the bright blue sky, where Jesus reigns in glory, a home of peace and joy. No home on earth is like it. nor can with it compare, for everyone is happy, nor could be happier there. Kind of sweet, but so dangerous. Because such words can leave you as an adult with the feeling, long after you've stopped believing in such a home, that your own life isn't it. That what's really important is going on in a different place or some other elevated realm, somewhere else. And when we believe the delusion of self-improvement, it's going on for somebody else, that improved version of ourselves that we project into the future. Somewhere else, somebody else. Being under the influence of these two intoxicants can rob you of your life. Hilda says, forget intoxicants, stick to tea. You know, the cup that cheers but not inebriates. When I'm woken while in the clutches of a particular delusion, it feels like something inside me and something outside of me is collaborating to provide a lifeline to sanity and more freedom. And since there's no separation, how could that be otherwise? Once I laughed in response to Hilda's laugh. There was so much more receptivity, and the whole world was colluding to wake me up from the self-centered dream. The garden was throbbing with life and beauty. The Sangha members coming for a mindful walk and the friends coming to stay were so precious. The woods which Jill led us into were lovely as the sun broke through the beech leaves. The fear in the friend who called round, struggling with her cancer diagnosis, feeling the same fear of dying in myself. Sylvia Plath said, getting ourselves out of the way, we see the beauty all around. And I would add to that, and the suffering. I don't think that getting ourselves out of the way means denying ourselves or not letting ourselves count. It's simply taking our place along with everything else. Flint says, we exist by the grace of everything and everyone else. And I want to say, and we awaken by the grace of everything and everyone else, and our own innate wisdom and longing. The longing that Suzuki Roshi called our inmost request. From this perspective, it makes no sense at all to believe that we're not worthy or good enough. And trying harder to be an improved version of what's been given by everything else is a complete nonsense. What does make sense is letting in life that's offering itself to us all the time, relaxing into emptiness, into everything else. As Flint once put it, allowing yourself to collapse into the fullness. It's always interested me how sometimes words in a book or thoughts spoken by someone else just seem completely irrelevant or dead or dusty. And other times words leap out at you and something inside you recognizes the truth in a way that moves your heart. Inside and outside, calling you to wake up. After the Sangha walk, I went back to this book, Through Forests of Every Colour by Joan Sutherland. Previously, Hilda had had opinions about the book, and they weren't very favourable. It's never wise to hold opinions too closely. Now, words were jumping out of every page, dancing and turning somersaults. And inside, I was saying, yes, that is how it is. And the biggest somersault of all happened when I read these words. When we encounter a koan like this one, taken from the poet Paul Eluard, there is another world, but it is inside this one. We know we're in the presence of the numinous and that we are receiving an invitation. There is another world, but it is inside this one. The invitation, and there lies the mystery. Hilda says, phew, no pie in the sky when you die then. No secret distant realms or future heavenly homes, but more than meets the eye in this world. But what is Paul Eluard speaking about? Koans are not puzzles that you solve intellectually, and I can't say I completely understand this one. I think they're more like whispers, invitations into your inner ear. And when you've been invited by one, you can just let it rattle around in you and notice what it illuminates. I don't understand it, but I have a felt sense of it because of a particular experience I sometimes have when I drive home by a back route. At one point, you drive through a quite enclosed part of the road with overhanging beech trees and cottages. Then, at a bend, they drop away and the Mayfield Valley is stretched out in front of you. An old-fashioned English northern landscape, including cottages and beech trees, but much larger and encompassing fields and lanes and one side of the valley rising up towards the sky. This specific view can really touch and lift my heart, drawing me out beyond annoyances and small concerns into a bigger space. So I drive that route whenever I can, even though it's often longer than the alternative. I'm putting myself in the way of an expanded, softened heart that knows I'm connected here and I belong. There are no guarantees that it will happen. It can't be called up on demand. I might be engrossed with the annoyances or talking away to a passenger. If it happens, it does so all by itself, with no efforting necessary. But of course, I do have to drive down quiet lane and pay attention. Then I've allowed the possibility of the meeting of my heart, just as it is, in the moment when I turn the bend, with the beauty and preciousness of the valley, just as it is. This really helps me to see what practice is about. And I found that Joan Sutherland had a lovely way of expressing this. She writes, practice is about making us fetchable. It helps us to recognise what gets in the way of our being fetched, and then it gives us a method to deconstruct the obstacles. Practice is about making us fetchable. I think we all long to be fetched, to be reached, to allow the dissolving of the obstacles to the connection that's already there, to be awakened to the world of everything else, to see that we're usually living out the delusion of a separate, detached, probably not good enough, solid self. A self that believes it must try harder to be acceptable. And since we seem to have a kind of built-in spiritual narcolepsy, the symptoms of which are that we can fall back asleep without warning, anywhere, anytime, we need constancy of practice and the grace of everything else, and a kindness and a humour towards ourselves and everyone else. So Hilda does come in handy. In Soto Zen, the practice above all, of course, is to sit zazen, just sitting. We're asked to stop in the middle of our spinning of delusion and sit with some dignity, noticing at least some of what's going on in our crazy minds. And we take our place along with everyone else, not better than, not worse than, just ourselves, this unique expression of life. We're asked to keep our eyes softly open so that we can be aware of all the other unique expressions who are sitting with us, and to help hold them up by the way that we sit, and to know that they're holding us up as well. It's an enactment of who we really are, delusion and all. We don't do anything. Well, we do have to sit down and shut up and allow Zazen to work on us. Flint says that Zazen is the non-negotiable practice for a Zen student. It gives the constancy we need. But I found that we can also invent for ourselves unofficial practices. It's a way of being creative and playful with ourselves and keeping open to being fetched. We can create rituals and we can be adopted by mantras. When I sit at home, I use rituals to entice all the parts of me who just don't actually want to sit. So I have candles and flowers and possibly incense. And since I love bowing, I include a fair bit of that. At the end, I open the curtains and I look out onto the garden, and I playfully bow to the first thing that seems to come forward to fetch me from the delusion of separateness. This morning, it was the glowing bark of a red cornice. A specific heart meeting another specific manifestation of the same life. Walking in this garden in the summer, doing a bit of walking meditation, I suddenly found my feet walking to the words, Namu Kibutsu, Namu Kibutsu, Namu Kibutsu. I plunge into the life of Buddha. It doesn't depend on sewing. It's always possible to be awakened at any point, anywhere. The other world of Paul Eluard is always there, waiting for you, with the invitation, come as you are. In that other world, there's no giver, no receiver, no gift, only gratitude for the one immeasurable field of giving and receiving. To end, in honour of Hilda, I want to get back to tea, to a koan and a practice recommended by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was well known for sitting down and drinking a cup of tea on the communal walks that he led. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the world earth revolves. Slowly, evenly, without rushing towards the future, as if it is the axis on which the world earth revolves." Which it is, of course, as is everything else. Such practice, if it's authentic, will soften the heart and the mind. Then what? That's the question. Well, here's a koan from 8th century China. Yunyan asked Dawu, "Who are you making tea for?" Dawu said, "Someone who wants it." "Why don't you have them make it for themselves?" "Fortunately, I'm here to do it." Fortunately, I'm here to do it. Thank you.